Hey, this is Rocket Brain Surgeon, and today we're looking at company battle tactics from Guerrillas, the best clan on the North American server. These replays were given to us by Garbad, and it's good to look at absolute tank companies because they're a great training ground for clan wars. We're going to be taking a look at 3 games, and we're going to focus on what the teams are doing on each side rather than the individual movements for the most part. One of the nicest things about this 3-game sample is that the tanks on each side are pretty evenly matched. You're going to see T-57s, E-100s, BATs, T-62s, and that's going to make up the majority of both sides of tanks. So we have one side with the same tanks as the other side, so it's really about how the team moves and how well they execute. The map is Arctic region, and G is going with a very familiar strategy where they send one main contingent to a location. Artillery is lagging behind, and then on the other flank they have a small delaying force. This is the basic Clan Wars strategy, and that's why I lead with it, just so we can get something familiar before we branch off. The other 2 games are going to be a little bit different and interesting for different reasons. Garbad is in the Leo 1, and he's going to be fulfilling some scouting duties. He's going to spot a contingent of tanks moving across this catway, and artillery has already aimed in on this spot. You're going to see there's a shot right there, and there will be another one that follows quickly after. Garbad is taking a couple hits here, and in a pub game this would be incorrect play, but this is not a pub game. There are 2 more artillery shots, you saw him there, that fly in. He needs to fulfill that scouting role. So it looks like he's playing a little bit dangerously, but it all goes to motive in the team context of things. If you look at the minimap, G is moving into the C2 through C3 area, and they're going to start the large brawl relatively shortly. However, the enemy team has something else in mind. In the previous video about G's Clan Wars, I mentioned that the best thing that a less experienced clan can do against G is to just take 15 tanks and plow them in one flank at G, and this is exactly what they do. Really, really love this play by them. The reason why it's so strong is because G does want to prevent against a wide range of strategies, including fast cap, and so those 3 tanks that are on the south side really can't offer a lot of help. Garbad and the other scouts get taken down very quickly, but then the enemy team just kind of goes awry. You can see that they are following one of the tanks into that south section when really they should be wrapping around up north. If they would have wrapped around up north, they would have taken out this bat in his reload cycle, and the game would have had a very interesting complexion to it. They probably would have been equal in tanks. One of the interesting things that this bat is doing is he's pushing against his enemy here, and that's to keep him in firing lines for his teammates. Another reason they shouldn't have gone south is the TD in E9 is able to get shots on them as well. If you look at G's deployment, you'll notice some very smart things going on. The 2 tank destroyers in A4 provide overwatch not only to those scouts in the early game, but as a push towards C1. The artillery is spread out, so if one artillery has shots, the other may not, but if one artillery does not have shots, then the other artillery will. The enemy put both their artillery in K1, K2, so they both can hit or not hit the same things. Also, the enemy should have set up their artillery differently. If they wanted to do a push towards or through D4 into certain areas, they probably should have put their artillery where it was able to help. Instead, they pushed a very small force, and that small force was effective for a short time, but it quickly ran out of steam because it just did not have enough tanks behind it. They have 2 tank destroyers sitting down in the south that were not able to participate as well. So G is working as a unit, and the other team split their forces more or less. Could have had a little bit better execution, but I really like what they did, and I think that they're on to something, and that they would learn from it next game and give them a much better fight. Next up we have Tundra, and this game is just a wonderful example of how well G works together as a team. Tundra is a very interesting map. Normally clan wars and tank companies are about forcing a brawl somewhere. You want to have all of your guns firing on a small contingent of their force at any given time. You don't want to split your forces. But the problem with Tundra is it's very difficult to force a brawl. There are tons of different canyons and valleys, so a defense can continuously move back behind cover and bleed a big push. So what G is going to do is they are going to actually spread out all over the map. In clan wars or tank companies, this is derogatorily referred to as a pub line, where people just kind of spread around the map. But even though that they're spread out around the map, they are not fighting as individuals, they are fighting as a team, and you're going to see that when you look at the minimap. We're going to speed up the deployment just a little bit. If you look at the minimap, people are going to very specific areas, and they're going to these places because those are the places with the best view and firing lines. Everyone is basically able to cover a lot of other people as well as having several defensive options available to them. So take a look at the west side. They don't spot anything. There are a couple bats and mediums trying to move up the hill. One of them gets taken down just because on Tundra there's a lot of different firing lanes, and so exposing yourself early like that is difficult. But the west, they don't spot anything, and notice how they're curving around. They're forming the line around the enemy in an encircling maneuver. By spreading out in this fashion, they can take advantage of the many firing lanes on the map. This option isn't available on a lot of maps, but on Tundra it definitely is. You can also see artillery is repositioning. That's something not a lot of artillery does, but artillery is repositioning to get better shots on the enemy. Now look at the minimap again. That is just beautiful how they are tightening the noose around the enemy. So far, they've been refraining from pushing because you wouldn't know where the enemy was. You didn't know when you were going to make contact. But now they know exactly where they're going to make contact because the enemy literally has nowhere to go. It's at this time that Garbad pushes forward with the rest of the team. They're all pushing forward as one. This is how you force the brawl on a map with a ton of different firing lanes. And the enemy team is just getting taken down because they have nowhere to hide. They're just completely encircled. If you're the enemy in this situation, you should try to push out through one side. Don't try to defend all sides. Sometimes when you're circled, the best way forward is just through. Pick a direction and go there. Get all of your tanks and push one way. Don't get picked off from several different angles like this. You can also see that artillery has repositioned yet again. Just wonderful movement all around. Next up is Northwest, and both teams have roughly the same loadout of tanks, except there's one very significant difference. Narwhal has a bunch of bats. More on that in a moment. The Northwest map is all about the northwest corner. Who knew? Generally, the people who control the northwest corner get vision of both the A line and the 1 line. If you have vision control of both those areas, you basically have vision control and firing lanes across 3/4 of the map. Both teams know that the northwest corner is the key to victory. However, there's one tiny problem. If you've ever played a bat chat on this map, you know what that problem is. When you get to A2, you are not loaded yet. So G has a couple of 140s, a T62, and Garbad's in the 121. When they get to A2, they will be fighting ready, and the bats will not be. Bats are amazing in many situations, especially those 5 bats in a mass brawl would be crazy good. But fighting and moving is not one of the strong points of a bat simply because they have horrible aim time. One bat goes down low and is quickly annihilated. You can see the entire team of G basically moving north and or able to shoot north. So what G is doing here is very subtle. They're not forcing a brawl with the bats. That would be playing to the strength of the bats. They're spread out and they are fighting piecemeal. This is the Bat's worst nightmare, is this situation right here, where you have a lot of Russian tanks at medium ranges. I think if the Bats would have worked their way to A1 at the beginning on the high road, on the far side of that high road just over the ridge here, there's a depression that would have cut off all of the incoming fire from the tanks, these medium tanks down in the valley. And in A1, it's slightly a depressed area as well, so the Bats could have forced the brawl that they wanted, rather than sitting up here and getting picked off. So G is up 5-0, but the game is not over yet. Garbad elects to go on the low road because the gun depression of the 121 is completely terrible. They're not really ready to push the one line yet. There's going to be too much up there. See, they spot a couple of heavies up top. There's the E100s lagging down below, and so Garbad is just going to keep them lit, and he has a dead tank in front of him to keep him company and provide cover. Garbad has switched to heat from armor piercing simply because the turret face of a E100 will only stop roughly rounds that have less than 300 penetration. So over 300 penetration, since the turret face is completely flat, it will go right through. G is content to sit back and let artillery work a bit. There's really no reason to push the action right now. They have control of the one line and the vision that confers, and they're pretty much content just to trade shots right now. This E100, if you're not ready to fire, you should be angling your turret roughly 15-20 degrees. So angle it kind of into the wall. Garbad's going to put multiple shots into the flat side of his turret. He should be aiming slightly to the left to avoid shots like that. I cut a little bit out because G has just been taking their time working the map. It's now time to push. It's 8-2 and they're starting to end the game, but Narwhal correctly makes a counter push on the A line. That's really good because if they can take away the A line, they can regain their vision and start sniping all of the tanks in the lower section. If you look at the minimap, you can see that G has completely lost control of that upper plateau, and there's just vulnerable tanks down below. So if Narwhal can solidify their control of that, it can be a very dangerous spot. Moreover, the two tanks in front of Garbad, and even Garbad himself, they're all one-shots. So it went from 8-2 to 9-6, with loss of control of the most important spot on the map. 10-7, this game is actually a lot closer than it looks. Garbad moves to retake control of the A line, or at least stopping them from just sniping from above with impunity. One of the important things in clan wars and tank companies is the sharing of HP across your team, not across your tank. It's not just you. So the E5 is actually going to lead the way. He's going to bait shots from this 268 because he can take a hit and actually survive. Garbad makes use of auto-aim here by auto-aiming on the tank as he rolls up the hill. With a tank that has very poor gun depression like the 121, sometimes it can be weird, and all you need to do when you auto-aim is you just wait for the circle to appear onto the enemy tank and then fire. So Warpagan did take a hit, but still lived, and this is the benefit of sharing HP across several tanks, is that now you still have two guns on the field rather than one gun if Garbad took the hit. And the game starts to slide into certain victory for G. Despite the disastrous start, Narwhal had a tremendous second effort with their push on the A-line. The big takeaway for these games is how well G sets up their firing lanes as a team. On Arctic region, they forced all of their firepower, or most of it, into the north. The enemy team split up, got dismantled. On Tundra, G did not engage until they had the enemy completely encircled. By that time, it was quick work. And on a map like Northwest, where there's exactly one strategic point to take advantage of, G sent their entire team there. Hope you enjoyed. Happy hunting.